The crimson warning lights bathed Stellar Port 7 in an eerie glow as the massive luxury starship Golden Phoenix shuddered to a complete stop just meters from the launch platform. Steam and sparks erupted from the vessel's rear engine compartment, sending maintenance crew scrambling for cover behind protective barriers. The acrid smell of burning exotic metals filled the recycled air of the space station. Hannah Kim stood frozen on the observation deck, her manicured fingers pressed against the reinforced viewing glass. At 35, she had built the largest shipping empire in 3-star systems, but right now she felt utterly powerless. Her custom-built starship, worth more than most planetary defense budgets, was dying before her eyes. The Golden Phoenix had been her pride and joy, equipped with the most advanced fourth and quantum drive money could buy. Status report. She barked into her communication device, her voice cutting through the chaos below. The response crackled back. Immediately. Ma'am, we have a complete quantum manifold failure. The exotic matter containment field has collapsed. We're lucky the whole ship didn't implode. Hannah's blood ran cold. Tomorrow's meeting with the Centauri Trade Consortium would either make her the wealthiest woman in known space or destroy everything she had worked for. The merger deal was worth 12 billion galactic credits. But the consortium's representatives were already suspicious of human businesses. Any delay would give them the excuse they needed to walk away. She rushed down to the launchpad, her high-heeled boots clicking against the metal grating. The scene was worse than she had imagined. A team of 6 Alterian engineers, the most expensive specialists in the galaxy, stood round the damaged ship like mourners at a funeral. Their tall, crystalline bodies shimmered with bioluminescent patterns that indicated deep concern. The lead engineer, Velta, approached her with slow, deliberate steps. His species communicated through harmonic resonance, making his voice sound like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. Honored Hannah Kim, the damage is catastrophic. The quantum resonance chamber has suffered complete molecular breakdown. The Vorthen-class systems require precision manufacturing that can only be accomplished at the core world's foundries. How long? Hannah asked, though she dreaded the answer. Minimum 3 standard weeks for parts acquisition and installation. Possibly longer if the foundries are backed up with military orders. The words hit her like a physical blow. 3 weeks. The consortium would never wait that long. They would sign with her competitor, Ryu Industries, and her dreams of expanding beyond the outer rim would crumble into space dust. Round the launchpad, curious onlookers had gathered. Traders, smugglers, station personnel, and various alien species all watched the drama unfold. Some whispered among themselves, probably calculating how Hannah's misfortune might benefit their own business interests. The galaxy was unforgiving to those who showed weakness. As despair began to settle over her like a heavy blanket, Hannah noticed a young human man approaching through the crowd. He was maybe 20 years old, wearing the simple coveralls of a station mechanic. Oil stains and burn marks decorated his work clothes like badges of honor. Over his shoulder, he carried a battered tool kit that looked like it had survived several small wars. June Park had been watching the situation unfold from the maintenance bay where he worked on the SMA, the cargo vessels that docked at Stellar Port 7. Unlike the expensive starships that came through the luxury bays, his usual clients were independent freighters, mining ships, and the occasional smuggler's vessel. He had never worked on anything as advanced as a Vorthen-class drive, but something about the smoking engine called to him. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said quietly, his voice nearly lost in the hissing of cooling pipes and the distant hum of the stations. "Life support systems. I might be able to help." The Alterian engineers turned toward him in unison, their crystalline faces reflecting the emergency lights. Velta's harmonic laughter filled the air, a sound like breaking glass mixed with music. "Human, you jest surely This is Vorthen-class technology, designed by the greatest engineers of the Helix Nebula. Your species has barely mastered faster-than-light travel. You work on cargo haulers and mining equipment. The other engineers joined in the laughter, their voices creating an almost musical chorus of condescension. One of them, a younger Altarian, named Kessil, stepped forward. Perhaps you should return to changing fusion core filters on freight runners, little human. Leave the real engineering to civilized species. June felt his cheeks burn with embarrassment, but he stood his ground. He had spent his entire life round engines, learning from his grandfather who had been one of Earth's last old-school mechanics. There was something universal about machines. Regardless of who built them, they all had hearts that pumped energy, veins that carried power, and souls that could be understood if you listened carefully enough. Hannah studied the young mechanic's face. Behind his quiet demeanor, she saw something the aliens had missed. Determination, confidence born not from arrogance but from genuine skill. In the corporate world, she had learned to read people quickly. And this human was different. What makes you think you can fix what they cannot? She asked. June looked up at the towering golden phoenix, his eyes tracing the elegant curves of its hull. Every machine speaks if you know how to listen, ma'am. Sometimes the fancier the technology, the simpler the real problem underneath. June squeezed through the narrow maintenance hatch, his compact human frame sliding easily into spaces that would challenge even the slimmest Altarian engineer. The engine compartment was a maze of gleaming pipes, pulsing conduits, and crystalline structures that hummed with residual energy. Emergency lighting cast strange shadows across the alien technology, making everything look like the inside of a giant mechanical heart. The first thing that hit him was the heat. Even with the main drive offline, the compartment was sweltering. Cooling systems designed for Altarian physiology weren't quite right for humans, and sweat began beading on his forehead within minutes. But June had worked in worse conditions, fixing broken atmospheric processes on asteroid mining stations where the temperature could melt steel. He crawled deeper into the engine bay, following the main power trunk that fed the quantum manifold. The damage was immediately obvious. The crystalline matrix that formed the heart of the Vorthen drive looked like a shattered diamond, its faceted surface cracked in a spiderweb pattern that spoke of catastrophic energy feedback. Exotic matter residue coated nearby surfaces with an oily rainbow sheen that shifted colors as he moved. No wonder they gave up, June whispered to himself, pulling out a small flashlight to get a better look. The quantum manifold was the most expensive single component on the entire ship, a piece of technology so advanced that only 3 facilities in the known galaxy could manufacture it. But as he traced the power conduits with his fingertips, feeling for heat signatures and electromagnetic patterns, something began to make sense. The aliens had built this system like a precision timepiece, every component perfectly calibrated to work with every other component. It was beautiful engineering, but it was also fragile. One failure cascaded through the entire system. Humans built things differently. They built them to break down and get fixed again. June wriggled out of the engine compartment and retrieved his toolkit from where he had left it near the access hatch. The battered metal case had belonged to his grandfather, who had learned his trade in the old shipyards of Earth before humanity had even dreamed of traveling between stars. Inside were tools that looked ancient compared to the gleaming diagnostic equipment the Altarian engineers used: wrenches, screwdrivers, wire strippers, and a dozen other implements that could have come from any garage on old Earth. Their thinking too complex, he muttered, selecting a simple voltmeter that was older than he was. Sometimes the best way to understand something complicated was to use something simple. The Altarian engineers had set up their diagnostic station just outside the engine compartment. their crystalline bodies glowing softly as they monitored the ship's systems. They watched June with barely concealed amusement as he disappeared back into the maze of machinery with nothing but primitive hand tools. The human will electrocute himself, Kessiel predicted, his harmonic voice carrying clearly through the ship's hull. Vorthan systems carry enough energy to power a small moon. Perhaps that would be educational for his species, Velto replied. They might learn some respect for superior technology. But inside the engine compartment, June was discovering something the aliens had missed. The quantum manifold might be destroyed, but the ship's secondary systems were perfectly functional. The Golden Phoenix had backup power distribution networks, auxiliary plasma conduits, and emergency field generators that could handle enormous amounts of energy. They just weren't designed to work together in the way he was imagining. Working by feel as much as sight, June began tracing alternate pathways. Through the ship's power grid, he followed conduits that led to the artificial gravity generators, tapped into the feed lines for the defensive shield ray, and identified connections to systems that the Eltarians probably didn't even know existed. Human ships were built with redundancy upon redundancy, and apparently some human engineer had worked on this vessel's construction dot. As the hours passed, more spectators gathered round the Golden Phoenix. Word had spread through Stellar Port 7 that a human mechanic was attempting something impossible. Traders interrupted their business to watch. Station security set up barriers to control the growing crowd. Even the port administrator, a dignified Centaurian with silver skin and forearms, arrived to observe the proceedings. The work was exhausting. The engine compartment was cramped, hot, and filled with the constant background hum of barely contained energy. June's coveralls were soaked with sweat, and his hands, which 26 hours had passed since June first crawled into the belly of the Golden Phoenix. The crowd round the launch pad had grown throughout the night, transforming from curious onlookers into something resembling a festival. Food vendors had set up stalls. Betting pools were running on whether the human would succeed or blow himself up, and several news drones hovered overhead broadcasting the event across the galaxy. June finally emerged from the engine compartment, looking like he had wrestled with a machine god and barely survived. Exotic coolant dripped from his hair in rainbow colors that shifted between blue and gold. His coveralls were stained with lubricants that glowed faintly in the artificial light, and burn marks decorated his arms where high-energy conduits had sparked during the rewiring process. His grandfather's toolkit looked even more battered than before, several wrenches now bearing scorch marks from plasma discharge, but his eyes burned with exhaustion and triumph. The Altarian engineers stood in a semicircle round their diagnostic equipment, their crystalline bodies flickering with patterns of disbelief. Their instruments showed readings that contradicted everything they understood about Vorthan technology. According to their senses, the human had somehow created a stable plasma flow-through systems that weren't designed to handle exotic matter. It was like watching someone play a symphony in kitchen utensils. Hannah Kim had spent the entire night pacing the observation deck, drinking cup after cup of synthetic coffee while watching her corporate future hang in the balance. She had fielded 17 calls from the Centauri Trade Consortium, each one more impatient than the last. Her competitors were already spreading rumors that her shipping empire was finished, that the great Hannah Kim had finally overreached herself. Now, she stood at the base of her ship, studying the young mechanic who had worked miracles with nothing but primitive tools and pure determination. June wiped his hands on an oil-stained rag that had seen better decades, leaving streaks of exotic lubricant across the worn fabric. "Try starting her up," he said quietly, his voice hoarse from breathing recycled air for over a day. The words sent a ripple of excitement through the gathered crowd. Betting odds shifted instantly on the various gambling boards that had sprung up round the port. The Rigelian traders in the front row leaned forward eagerly, their multiple eyes glittering with anticipation. Even the usually stoic Centaurian port administrator found himself holding his breath. Hannah approached the ship's external control panel with trembling fingers. The Golden Phoenix had cost her more than some planets were worth, and she was about to trust its fate to modifications that every expert had declared impossible. She placed her palm on the biometric scanner and spoke the activation command. Golden Phoenix, primary ignition sequence. For a moment, nothing happened. The silence stretched like a held breath across the entire launch pad. Then, deep within the ship's hull, something began to stir. The sound that emerged was unlike anything the aliens had ever heard from a Vorthan drive. Instead of the high-pitched crystalline whine that characterized quantum manifold engines, the Golden Phoenix produced a deep, powerful thrum that seemed to vibrate through the deck plating and into the bones of everyone present. It was the sound of raw mechanical power, of forces barely contained and perfectly controlled. The Altarian engineers' diagnostic equipment erupted in cascades of data that made their harmonic voices rise in Aston. Ishment, power readings climbed steadily past normal operating parameters, but instead of triggering safety shutdowns, the hybrid system seemed to grow stronger and more stable with each passing second. Velta's crystalline face flickered through a rainbow of colors as he processed the impossible. Readings, the energy output is beyond theoretical maximums. He announced to no one in particular. The plasma compression ratios are exceeding anything we've seen from a Vorthan drive. Kessil was frantically recalibrating his instruments, convinced they were malfunctioning. This cannot be accurate. The quantum resonance should be completely unstable. The exotic matter flow is being channeled through systems that weren't designed for this kind of energy density, but the readings didn't lie. June's hybrid system wasn't just functional, it was producing 30% more thrust than the original Vorthan design. The modifications he had made using salvaged components and human engineering principles had somehow created a more efficient engine than the aliens' precision technology. The crowd erupted in cheers and gasps of amazement. The Rigelian traders began calculating the implications for interstellar commerce. The news drone swooped closer, their cameras capturing every detail of the historic moment. This wasn't just a successful repair, it was a revolution in propulsion technology. Hannah stood frozen beside the control panel, watching the power readings climb past levels she had only dreamed of. Her ship wasn't just fixed, it was better than it had ever been. The meeting with the Centauri Trade Consortium was no longer about salvaging a failing deal. Now, she had something unprecedented to offer them. The Golden Phoenix lifted gently off its landing struts, hovering 3 meters above the launch pad with perfect stability. The hybrid drive's deep thrum filled the air with a sound that spoke of untamed power held in perfect balance. Exotic energy crackled along the ship's hull in patterns that resembled lightning frozen in metal and crystal. June stood apart from the celebrating crowd. Exhausted but vindicated, his grandfather had always told him that every machine had a soul, and that the key to fixing anything was learning to speak its language. Tonight, he had proven that human intuition could accomplish things that alien science considered impossible. The implications rippled outward from Stellar Port 7 like waves from a dropstone. If a human mechanic with simple tools could revolutionize Vorthan technology, what else might humanity accomplish given the chance? The galaxy's established hierarchies were about to be challenged by species that the major powers had dismissed her. As primitive dot as the Golden Phoenix settled back onto its landing struts with mechanical grace, June realized that this was only the beginning. He had just proven that human engineering could not only compete with alien technology, it could surpass it. The Golden Phoenix lifted gracefully from Stellar Port 7's launchpad, its modified engines producing the distinctive deep thrum that had already become legendary among the watching crowd. Hannah Kim gripped the pilot's seat as her luxury starship responded to controls with a sensitivity and power she had never experienced before. The ship felt alive beneath her hands, eager and responsive like a thoroughbred ready to run. All systems showing green across the board, announced the ship's AI in its melodious synthetic voice. Hybrid drive operating at optimal parameters, quantum resonance stable, plasma flow nominal. But those clinical words couldn't capture what Hannah was feeling as she guided her ship through the initial test maneuvers. The Golden Phoenix moved through space with a fluid grace that defied its massive size. When she engaged the main drive, the acceleration was so smooth and powerful that she barely felt the G-forces that should have pressed her back into her seat down in the observation lounge. June watched the test flight through the ship's panoramic windows, his exhausted body finally beginning to relax for the first time in over a day. The view of Stellarport 7 falling away below them was spectacular. But what really caught his attention were the readouts streaming across the various display screens throughout the passenger compartment. The hybrid drive was performing beyond his wildest expectations. Not only was it producing more thrust than the original Vorthen system, but it was doing so with remarkable efficiency. The fuel consumption rates were actually lower than the factory specifications, meaning the ship could travel farther on the same amount of exotic matter. But the real miracle was the drive's versatility. June's modifications had inadvertently created something unprecedented in galactic engineering, a propulsion system that could seamlessly switch between different operating modes. Depending on the situation, for high-speed interstellar travel, the quantum components provided the exotic matter manipulation needed for faster-than-light jumps, for precise maneuvering around space stations or through asteroid fields. The plasma systems offered incredible control and responsiveness. Engaging FTL transition, Hannah announced over the ship's communication system, "Let's see what this beauty can really do." The jump to hyperspace had always been the Golden Phoenix's signature moment. The original Vorthen drive would build up energy for 7 whole minutes, creating a spectacular light show as exotic matter was compressed and accelerated to impossible speeds. Then reality would seem to fold in on itself as the ship punched through the fabric of space-time. But June's hybrid system made the transition with an elegance that left everyone speechless. Instead of the violent reality tearing that characterized most FTL drives, the Golden Phoenix seemed to simply slide sideways out of normal space. One moment they were accelerating away from Stellarport 7. And the next they were racing through the swirling colors of hyperspace at velocities that would have carried them across the galaxy in mere weeks. The acceleration readings were staggering. The hybrid drive was pushing the ship through hyperspace at speeds that exceeded even military specifications. What should have been a 15-minute test flight to the edge of the star system became a journey that carried them halfway to the next solar system before Hannah finally decided to turn back. During the return trip, news of the successful test began spreading across the galactic communication networks at the speed of quantum entangle. In Ant, the story was too extraordinary to ignore. A human mechanic with primitive tools had not only repaired advanced alien technology, but had improved it beyond the original designer's capabilities. The first requests for meetings began arriving before the Golden Phoenix had even returned to Stellarport 7. Representatives from the Helix Nebula Engineering Consortium wanted to understand how human mechanical principles could be integrated with their technology. The Regelian Trade Federation inquired about licensing June's modifications for their merchant fleet. Even the secretive Andromedans, who rarely dealt with younger species, sent a carefully worded message expressing interest in cultural and technological exchange. But perhaps the most significant response came from an unexpected source. Deep in the core worlds, where the galaxy's most advanced civilizations maintained their centers of learning and power. The Academy of Sciences issued a statement that sent shockwaves through the established order. For the first time in recorded history, they formally requested that a human engineer be granted access to their most classified research facilities. As the Golden Phoenix settled back onto its landing pad at Stellar Port 7, the crowd that had gathered to watch the test flight had grown into a massive celebration. Traders, mechanics, smugglers, and representatives from dozens of species cheered as the revolutionary starship touched down with mechanical precision that would have impressed even the most demanding flight instructor. June found himself surrounded by beings he had only seen in textbooks and news feeds. The Altarian engineers who had mocked him just hours earlier now approached with respectful bows, their crystalline bodies glowing with patterns that indicated deep admiration. Velta, the lead engineer who had dismissed human capabilities, extended one of his long, elegant hands in a gesture of respect. "Human Junpak," he said, his harmonic voice now carrying notes of genuine reverence. "You have taught us that wisdom comes not from complexity, but from understanding. We would be honored to learn from your methods." The transformation in attitudes was remarkable to witness. Species that had considered humans to be technologically primitive were now eager to understand how human engineering principles could achieve results that their own advanced science had declared impossible. Hannah stood on the observation deck of her transformed ship, watching the celebration unfold on the launch pad below. The test flight had lasted only 15 minutes. But those 15 minutes had changed everything. Her business empire was now secure. But more importantly, humanity had just earned a new level of respect among the stars. She found June standing quietly near the panoramic windows, watching the crowd with a mixture of pride and bewilderment. The young mechanic still looked exhausted, his coveralls still stained with exotic coolants. But there was something different about him now. He carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who had just proven that the impossible was merely difficult. "How did you know it would work?" she asked, joining him at the window. June was quiet for a long moment, watching the alien dignitaries and reporters gathering round the Golden Phoenix. Finally, he shrugged with characteristic modesty. "Sometimes you just have to listen to what the machine is telling you," he said softly. "Every engine has its own personality, its own way of doing things. The aliens built this ship to be perfect, but perfect can be fragile. Humans build things to be strong, to adapt, to keep working even when everything goes wrong." He paused, then smiled slightly. "I guess I just helped this ship remember how to be human." The Golden Phoenix touched down on Stellar Port 7's main landing pad with the grace of a bird returning to its nest. The crowd that had gathered to witness the test flight erupted in cheers that echoed through the station's vast hangar bays. News drones buzzed overhead like mechanical insects, their cameras capturing every moment of what historians would later call the beginning of humanity's technological renaissance. Hannah Kim stood at the ship's main viewport, watching the celebration unfold below. Her mind was racing with possibilities she had never dared to imagine just 24 hours earlier. The successful test flight had proven that her ship wasn't just repaired, it was transformed into something unprecedented in galactic engineering. The implications were staggering. Already, her communication ray was overloaded with incoming messages. The Centauri Trade Consortium had moved their meeting up by 2 days, eager to discuss not just the original merger, but entirely new possibilities for interstellar commerce. The Regelian shipbuilders were offering astronomical sums for the rights to study June's modifications. Even the mysterious Void Walkers, who rarely communicated with younger species, had sent a cryptic message expressing interest in the human who speaks the language of machines. But it was the message from the core worlds that had truly caught her attention. The Galactic Engineering Council, dominated by the most advanced civilizations in known space, was formally requesting a demonstration of human hybrid technology. For the first time in their 1,000-year history, they were acknowledging that a primitive species might have something valuable to teach them. As the celebration continued outside, Hannah made her way down to the landing pad where June stood. Surrounded by alien dignitaries and engineers, the young mechanic looked overwhelmed by the attention. His oil-stained coveralls a stark contrast to the elegant robes and crystalline forms of the beings gathered round him. Yet there was something remarkable about the way they treated him, not as a curiosity or lucky amateur, but as a peer whose expertise they genuinely respected. Velta, the Altarian engineer who had mocked June just hours earlier, was deep in conversation with the human mechanic about plasma flow dynamics. The crystalline being's body glowed with patterns that indicated intense fascination as June explained his modifications using simple diagrams drawn on a grease-stained piece of metal. The key is not fighting the exotic matter, June was saying, his voice carrying clearly despite the noise of the crowd. It's like dealing with a stubborn animal. You don't force it to do what you want, you convince it that what you want is what it wants to. The gathered engineers exchanged glances of amazement. This human was describing advanced quantum mechanics, using analogies that a child could understand. Yet his approach had achieved results that eluded their most sophisticated theories. Hannah watched the scene with growing excitement. An idea was forming in her mind, one so ambitious that it made her previous business ventures seem small by comparison. She had built her shipping empire by recognizing opportunities that others missed. Now she was seeing the biggest opportunity in galactic history unfolding right in front of her. She approached June as the crowd began to disperse. Various aliens promising to contact him with collaboration offers and research proposals. The young mechanic looked exhausted but happy, his grandfather's toolkit still slung over his shoulder like a badge of honor. "Walk with me," Hannah said, guiding him toward the observation deck that overlooked the busy spaceport. Through the massive, transparent aluminum windows, they could see the endless stream of ships arriving and departing from Stellar Port 7. Cargo haulers, passenger liners, military vessels, and private yachts created a constant ballet of controlled chaos against the backdrop of space. "Look at all those ships," Hannah said, her voice filled with excitement and possibility. "Every one of them is using technology that could be improved with human engineering principles. Every one represents a problem that conventional alien science can't solve, but human intuition might." June nodded, understanding where she was heading. "You're thinking bigger than just one ship. Much bigger." Hannah turned to face him, her eyes bright with the kind of vision that had made her one of the wealthiest beings in the galaxy. "I'm not just offering you a job, June. I'm offering you a partnership. Help me build a new kind of engineering company, one that combines human intuition with alien technology. Together, we can solve problems that no one else even attempts." The offer hung in the air between them like a challenge to the universe itself. June looked out at the stars beyond the station's atmospheric barrier, thinking of his grandfather who had spent his life fixing broken things with nothing but skill and determination. The old man had always believed that a good mechanic could repair anything if he understood its heart. Now, his grandson had the chance to prove that human ingenuity could earn respect among the stars. He established engineering guilds won't like it, June pointed out. "We'll be challenging thousands of years of accepted wisdom." Hannah smiled, the expression of a predator who had just spotted her prey. "Let them complain. By the time they figure out how to respond, we'll already be revolutionizing half the galaxy's infrastructure." She gestured toward the bustling spaceport. Below them, Think about it, June. Faster cargo ships mean cheaper goods for frontier colonies. More efficient passenger liners mean families separated by light years can stay in touch. Better military vessels mean safer borders for everyone. And it all starts with human mechanics who understand that machines have souls, the vision was. Intoxicating. June could see it spreading like ripples from a dropped stone. Human engineers working alongside alien scientists, creating hybrid technologies that neither species could develop alone. Workshops where intuition met precision, where the art of mechanical empathy combined with advanced theoretical knowledge. But more than that, he could see respect. For the first time since humanity had joined the galactic community, other species would look at humans and see equals, partners, innovators worthy of admiration rather than condescension. "When do we start?" he asked, extending his hand. The handshake that followed was witnessed by hundreds of beings from dozens of species. News cameras captured the moment when a human billionaire and a station mechanic formed a partnership that would reshape the technological landscape of the galaxy. The image would become iconic, representing the moment when humanity stepped forward to claim its place among the stars not through conquest or diplomacy, but through the simple act of making broken things work better than they ever had before. As they shook hands on the landing pad, surrounded by alien engineers who now looked at humanity with newfound respect, June knew that this was just the beginning. The galaxy was about to discover what humans could accomplish when they combined heart, skill, and determination with resources and opportunity. The age of human engineering had begun. And somewhere in the vast expanse of space, 1,000 problems that had seemed impossible were about to meet their match in the form of beings who understood that every machine, no matter how advanced, just wanted to be understood. The entry triclord can make mistakes. Please double-check responses. Air stained with exotic coolants that probably violated several environmental protection laws. But he pressed on, driven by something deeper than stubbornness. This was about more than fixing one ship. Every human in the galaxy had felt the condescending attitude of species that considered Earth's children to be primitive upstarts. They were tolerated as traders and laborers, but never taken seriously as engineers or innovators. Tonight, that might change. Around midnight, June made the crucial breakthrough. Instead of trying to repair the quantum manifold, he began bypassing it entirely. Using salvaged components from the ship's secondary systems, he created a completely new power pathway. Plasma that would normally flow through the crystalline matrix was redirected through the artificial gravity generators, which could compress and accelerate it almost as efficiently. The energy output was then channeled through modified shield projectors, creating a hybrid propulsion system that combined human engineering principles with alien technology. The watching aliens whispered among themselves in growing amazement. This was theoretically impossible. Vothan drives were precision instruments that couldn't be modified without destroying their quantum coherence. Yet somehow, the young human was creating something that shouldn't work but clearly did. As dawn approached over Stellar Port 7, June emerged from the engine compartment one final time. His grandfather's tools clutched in hands that shook with exhaustion and excitement.